So our next guest, he is someone who you may recognize as one of the world's most iconic designers. He is also a passionate mental health advocate who is fighting the stigma and calling for the support during this pandemic. Now, you might know him because during the height of AIDS crisis in the 1980s, he worried that the stigma of AIDS might kill more than the disease. So he launched a global campaign to talk openly about AIDS. Now, after 3 decades of work on that crisis, he's bringing the same blueprint to mental health. He recently launched the Mental Health Coalition. It's a collection of 36 advocacy groups, platforms, celebrities, and business leaders. So please welcome, live from New York, fashion designer and social activist, Kenneth Cole. Hello. How are you?
Hi, Gabriella. Thank you. We're becoming best friends quickly.
I know we are. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to contribute to your How Are You Really campaign. And I really think that this is a special moment to share this. So I'm going to just let you be and share your whole story and journey for mental health. And I truly appreciate everything that you're doing. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you as well, Gabrielle. It's very impressive what you're doing and the impact you have been able to make with the resources that you have been able to aggregate. So all very impressive. I also actually had gotten to know Barbara Ricci, who I just got to hear speak up again. And because I'm also fascinated by why it's so hard for this community to make its case and why it's so difficult to find the appropriate funding. Especially in light of, I guess, my journey and what got me here. So I guess I'll kind of give you a little bit of context in that regard. I'm not a public health person. This is not what I do. I sell stuff. I design and I sell stuff for a living. Less of it these days. In fact, I think we, like just about every other company in America, has formally become a not-for-profit this year. But all seriousness aside, I essentially grew up professionally in the fashion business, and what fashion business is about, creating context for everything that you do, and fashion is it's a relative expression. What's fashionable to you may not be to me. What's fashionable to you today may not be tomorrow. So, but so every day you have to essentially put yourself in the shoes of your targeted audience, and in the hope that they'll want to put themselves in yours, or in this case, in mine. So, and what's on their bodies, ultimately, if you want to know, if what's on their mind, ultimately will determine what eventually is going to be on their bodies, and what they stand for will ultimately influence what they stand in. So that's what I do in the ordinary course. And then in the 80s, it was clearly HIV, and nobody was talking about it, and it was because stigma was so devastating. And as Gabriella just said, I have always made the case that I believe it's killed more people than the virus itself. And I accepted a position as a UN AIDS ambassador, which I still hold in the help guiding them towards a cohesive 2030 ending AIDS as a global health crisis. But ultimately, it's and to a large degree, it's about controlling the global narrative. So just again, context, 35 million people have died of AIDS so far. 37 million people today are living with it. And mostly, I believe, of stigma. But that's 1 in 200 people in the world. 1 in 4, I've come to learn, are living with mental health conditions. And I actually make the case that it's more like 4 in 4, because if it isn't you, it's somebody that you love, or somebody in your family, in your community, or in the workplace. So everybody is living with mental health conditions, which is why it's staggering to me that we can't get appropriate resources are not brought to this. Either because for the right philanthropic reasons, or at the end of the day for the right business reasons. Because if you can't make, and I've actually spoken to Barbara specifically about this, because if you can't make the case, the philanthropic case, then make the business case that if you don't spend $1 today, it's going to cost you, they say 11, I think it's 100 tomorrow. And because it affects every single aspect of every ill in our community is exacerbated because of mental illness. And again, I'm probably speaking to the choir here. So So if we accept the fact that stigma today in mental health is like what it was with HIV 20 years ago, which is what I keep hearing, and I accept that, um, then why don't we make that our part of our effort? And my daughter Amanda actually was the lead advocate at the time, and we as a company took on, and we worked with NAMI, and we made ourselves a stigma-free company, and we realized the value of that and the impact that we could make in our own little community. But then the question is, and the task, and from friends at NAMI and others, well, would you take this on in a bigger stage, and try to see if you can do some sort of a campaign to change this, to affect the global stigma, which is a vastly kind of an overwhelming even notion to even contemplate. But so, and that one says, well, that's about changing the vocabulary and variably the narrative, and ultimately rebranding it. Because I spoke to several healthcare professionals and doctors and psychiatrists, and I actually I spoke to 5, and I asked them for the definition of depression, and I got 5 different answers. So, which then one concludes that if there isn't an acceptable narrative, hence you can see why the existing narrative is so debilitating, and there's nothing about it that is empowering, and so one says to come up with a new narrative, a new vocabulary, and ultimately to rebrand mental health. So that was what we started down. And then I also came to believe quickly. So I said to our friends at NAMI, if we did it, would you do it with us? They said yes. And then we reached out to pretty much all of the largest healthcare, public health providers, service providers in this country. And every one of them said unequivocally yes. So it was very flattering. And we built this, it has become known, all aligned, all committed to changing the narrative. But also, because if you accept that, we all say, well, okay, let's change the narrative, but everybody comes up with a different alternative, then you don't make any progress. So if we can all hold hands around one, then we can make a very big impact, I believe. And and I do believe that it needs to somewhat be embraced by the establishment. It needs to be very uncomplicated. So that aligned. Our friends at Pentagram, who I think are the best branding people, agreed to help us in that regard, pro bono. And and we've got a lot of other great creative partners and media partners together. And we set out to ultimately marry resources to needs. So, first through the changing of the narrative. So, and everybody agrees and holds hands that we're going to accomplish. We're going to navigate this path together, and and then we're working on a mechanism to do that. And then my daughter Katie puts forth a proposal with an initiative that she had established called How Are You Really? Which, as one invariably knows, that is the most globally asked question and the least answered everywhere, every day. And is it because we don't want to know the answers, because we don't have the time to know the answer? At the end of the day, it's a place most of us just don't want to go, and it's a hard place to go, and it's often a vulnerable place to go. So then we agree, and the coalition agrees that we'll put forth this proposal. We'll set up a platform, which howareyourreally.org. We'll ask that question. We'll do it in the form of a challenge, and we'll invite everybody to take a chance and to answer that question in the most honest way they can, and do it in a place that's safe. And the platform is in fact that. So essentially encouraging them to either be vulnerable or be empathetic or anywhere in between, but try to be honest, and that's the objective. And then at the same time, challenge others, 3 to 5 other people to answer the question as well. And then share it on the platform, howareyourelly.org, and then start a conversation. So, and we've had great response in our friends in the social media, Instagram, and were great and supported it, and as did Twitter. So so that is kind of is the path. And ultimately what it does is the goal now is to engage with an impressive group of celebrities and influencers, and business people and media people. And ultimately, it's a first step in marrying them to these resource providers. So so this is the path that we were on, and then COVID comes along. We were not originally going to launch this until the end of the year, and then obviously everything got accelerated because the need became so much greater and so much more real. And also, I don't think it's 4 out of 4 people live with mental health conditions. I think it's 5 out of 4. I think even our pets are forced to live with it. But it's so pervasive in all of our lives. And I read recently of a study after SARS, and of those that were quarantined, and 30% had lasting symptoms of PTSD, and another 30% of depression. And this self-imposed isolation / quarantine is so much broader. It is global, and it is pervasive. The implications of which are, I don't think we have the ability to grasp. But it will be so much more disruptive to our communities than that which the physical virus has in fact imposed upon us. So I do think that this is a moment in time where we all can reflect, and I think at the end of the day, hopefully we can. There's some real lessons that are learned here, and this is the first initiative for the Mental Health Coalition, but it's an important one, and it's one that will stand and hopefully survive in and of itself. But I urge you guys to please try it. And I think I did it actually, and it was sobering, and I wasn't sure where it was gonna take me, but I reflect back on it only with good thoughts. So please do that, share it, challenge others to do the same. And I think this is an important road that we're on, and it feels like we can make a meaningful difference in people's lives. And I'm appreciative just to have a chance to have a voice amongst all these people, Gabrielle included, and Deepak, and so many others that are making such an impact every day. So, and I also thank all of our partners, coalition partners, who are extraordinary. And they do have the time, by the way, to answer that question. And that's what they do every day. And they've got organizations that answer that question every day, and that can help you answer those questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. That was wonderful. It's how are you really is the challenge. It's important to find a safe space and feel safe. And I feel that that's safe space is your life, your relationship to yourself, your self-awareness. So please do the challenge if you can do it. howareyourelly.org. You can find out more about the Mental Health Coalition on the mentalhealthcoalition.org as well. Thank you, Kenneth.